to Drew, director behind Frame Switch, and Christina, producer. One of the producers?
Yes, one of the producers.
Behind Frame Switch. So congratulations on Frame Switch.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in Berlin.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Thank you. And who wants to tell me a synopsis about your wonderful film?
Well, Frame Switch is a mystery thriller that's told from the perspective of security cameras and dash cams and webcams, cell phones and news reports and even drones. And it kind of, when you put all these camera angles together that exist in our real world that we live in every day, it kind of tells the story of these city officials who are murdering people and covering it up and laundering money and through the insurance and everything. So it's kind of like this scheme that they're perpetrating, and it's up to the city auditor, played by Deanna Broshin, to kind of unravel the mystery with the help of an ambulance chasing attorney named Spencer Sharp.
Right, okay, brilliantly done. I've met Deanna.
Yeah, Deanna Broshin,
yeah,
yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Obviously we're going to come back to you, but I just want to pick up on something that we were talking about before the interview. So you're not per se a producer, and this is your first kind of project, anything to do with film. So I mean, I could talk to you for hours now. I know that because now I know you had nothing to do before. So I know you're involved with Drew, so you know about filmmaking, of course. But your whole experience. So how much of it was how you imagined it to be, and is that possible to explain?
Oh, yes, of course. Well, I mean, you watch all these Hollywood films and they always depict what filmmaking looks like.
Yeah.
And so it was, and it wasn't like what I thought it would be. Of course, we're working on a low-budget film here, totally local. We are scrappy. We use all of our resources, and so I guess seeing that part of it, I didn't expect. But that's what made me fall in love with it. That's what made me want to get more involved, was seeing how scrappy you had to be to really put a film together when you don't have a whole lot of money and you don't know a whole lot of people.
And what were you doing prior to this? What was your career before you had?
Well, I was in school, getting my degree, and I want to pursue policy.
Right.
Ultimately, but right now I'm a school teacher.
Policy. Sorry, when you say policy, do you mean, are we talking about something to do with politics or governance or something?
Public policy.
Right. Okay. And then, because this is complete, if you excuse the pun, the switcheroo from what you're... No, I don't know where that came from, so I didn't mean to say that. But like I say, I know you and Drew are an actor, but even so, it's amazing, really. You've managed to just sort of delve into this and actually,
Thank you.
Hats off to you. So you're involved, suddenly you're thrown in, okay, I'll help produce this. What does that actually mean? Because I always think, I've got my because I speak to filmmakers all the time, I always think of a filmmaker as someone is wearing a hat, but actually you could be involved. What I mean by this, I might explain this badly, is it's not just finance, but you might be involved in, I don't know, organising the catering or the transport. I honestly don't know. Am I completely wrong? Are you absolutely involved in every sort of aspect of the whole process?
I helped wherever was needed.
Right, okay.
So it started out small. I would just be on set, and I love taking pictures, so I was taking pictures of all the actors on set and Drew directing and everything like that, and then I started getting a little more involved, and we were talking about, well, we have to come up with $30,000. How are we going to do that?
Right.
And I said, well, I know some people. I have friends and family. Let me reach out to them.
Get those credit cards.
Exactly. And so we get all the paperwork together, and we head down to my hometown, Corpus Christi, Texas, and we threw a party, and we raised a lot of money, and I continued to find friends and family both in Corpus Christi and in Austin, where we live, and before we know it, I raised about a third of the total budget.
So is that enough to begin the project on this scale?
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
So you're still trying to churn the money, but so how long? What kind of headroom does that give you in terms of when you're say, okay, you can now make a start, but what would that give you? A week approximately? I mean, I don't know if you can put a timeline on this kind of. You must have an approximation.
No, you can, absolutely, because we had done a rough budget that actually turned out to be fairly accurate at the end, and we only raised initially, I think we had $3,500 before. We had $3,500, and we knew that was enough to at least do the first 5 shooting days or so.
Right.
And I packed as much as we possibly could into those 5 days. So I think that, that's a really good start. So once you have those 5 days, that's 1/4 of our shooting schedule, right? So then you have enough to show other people, hey, we're serious about this. We can take that to show other people, hey, this is going to happen now. Then you use that to raise the next few thousand. And then you make a little bit more, and you show that to more people.
And it gets easier to raise money over time because you have more to show for for
It's
your
a
work.
snowball. Absolutely.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a snowball.
Oh yeah, because of course you've got the process, and then you can say, well, actually, you can see what we've shot so
Right.
far, and
Right.
and that I assume and hope is an impetus to help get more funding.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
The hardest part was the beginning. How are we going to get the first,
Well, I kind of describe this like a
money
house
to
of
do the
cards
first
because
few
it's like,
days?
well, I need the money to do this. It's like, but this isn't going to stand up by itself, and neither is this. But so you have to exaggerate a little bit about like what you're capable of doing. I think, especially with your first film, you have to kind of reassure people, hey, I know that we've never made a feature film before, but you can trust us. And so like trust us with just a couple $1,000 and see what we can do, and then from there, you can kind of platform it along the way, and then we just did that the entire time. It took 3.5 years to finish the whole thing.
Yeah, it's not unsurprising. Actually, John was giving me the timeline, and I mean, there's one filmmaker here. It's taken 6 years to make a film. I know a filmmaker here, that has got a film. I don't know if it was this festival and the previous one. It took him 18 years because he shot it over. But it's a documentary, and it's about the Arab-Israeli conflict, and he shot it from 16mm when moved on to digital. So it was just a long film. But 3 years is not uncommon here,
Right.
because I know you're trying to fund finance and get bits and pieces together. And so
In the nature of our film, we had actually finished principal photography by November of that. We started in January. It took us about 11 months to finish the principal photography, and then another 2 years of editing and negotiating with the musicians, like trying to get the music, finding the perfect sound effects, the perfect special effects, going frame by frame through those special effects. And there are a lot of digital effects that we use in Frame Switch, and so it took 2 years to edit with just 1 year of filming. Yeah, most of that was in editing.
And we had one editor,
right, of course,
doing all of the work.
And digital's, I mean, I know the price has dropped, but even so, digital effects are still quite expensive, I think, aren't they? Unless you know the right people, I don't know.
I think it's expensive if you want to have it done quickly, but if you're willing to put in the time yourself, and you're just one or two people who know how to do it, and you're willing to say, hey, this could take a couple of years, but we'll just go frame by frame till we do it, it can be done fairly inexpensively, but it's still a headache, and you still have people along the way who's like, is this ever going to be finished? I mean, are you still working on that movie? And so it's not just convincing yourself to move forward on a daily basis. You have to remind everybody that, hey, yeah, we're still moving forward. This is going to happen. Don't worry. I know it's been a couple of years, and it might be another year, but it's going to happen. Yeah.
So did you, I don't know your work process, but would you or did you storyboard this? And if you did storyboard, did you do it to help raise finance?
I did not storyboard this because the nature of the filming of this, even though it was a narrative, we kind of did it documentary style in a way, in some ways. So I let the camera run. Like, say, there's some scenes of people, let's say, doing their scene in their car and they're driving around. We just drive around the block and just let the cameras roll. Like, there was never a cut. It's just do it again, do it again, do it again. And so we ended up with like many hours of footage, many scenes that we didn't use. So the approach was documentary, even though it was a narrative feature.
Yes, a narrative feature. Yeah, but I mean, obviously that was deliberate to get that kind of look. So is that? So I suppose the point I'm trying to make is, because it's a kind of, it's not a traditional sort of narrative feature. I mean, which is a great thing because it's something new and you're new, and I don't know, new is the right word, but it's a little bit left of field.
Yeah.
So I'm guess it wouldn't have been any point in storyboarding because is it something you just couldn't put into pictures? Does that make sense?
Right. Well, the closest thing that I would do to storyboards in this case are I would do a lot of overheads.
Yeah. Right.
You know, like if we're in this room and I would go out and look at the room that we had to shoot in, it's like, where would there logically be a camera?
Right.
Oh, right. So you literally,
Right.
as the name would suggest, you're overheading it and looking down and.
Right.
Yeah,
And then you try to say, okay, if there's going to be a camera on this corner, we need a reverse. So how do we get the reverse? Well, maybe there's a webcam on this computer that's in the room. Okay, so you can get a reverse that way.
It was very specific to the shape and feel of the room. You know, where would the camera belong?
Right, and then some of the camera angles are actually activated by the characters themselves. Like there's a scene where Deanna comes in and she's sitting down at her computer, and then she turns on her computer, and then that camera angle starts.
Right.
So the cameras themselves, the characters themselves can provide the motivation for the next camera.
And they
angle.
manipulate the cameras.
Exactly,
And the
yeah.
angles that we are able to see as the audience.
Right.
Now, I mean, I can't imagine you could have thought about all of that, or in terms of cameras, because it's digital technology, it's computers involved, and webcam, CCTV. So was some of it ad hoc as you were going along? Did you pretty much know how you were going to do it? Because there is so much unusual camera work.
I don't like doing anything ad hoc, especially when we arrive on the set and you have 8 or 10 other people standing around, and you're paying them, and you need to get done with whatever you have to do as soon as possible. So no, I wouldn't say that it was ad hoc. We definitely knew where these angles were coming from before we stepped onto the set. But that's not to say that we didn't improvise.
Right, that might be a better word that I'm looking for. Sorry, yeah. Okay,
right. So there are a couple of things that were improvised. One of my favorite shots in the entire film is where we suddenly cut to the back of this. When you're driving like your Range Rover, and then you have your Range Rover.
Yeah. I've got a Bentley as well.
Yeah, exactly. But they have like the camera, the backup camera, and so you can see what's behind the car. As you're in the car.
Right, okay.
I didn't suggest that angle. I had no intention to put that in, but then one of our actors said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could have, don't these cars usually have cameras? We should just shoot from that angle.
Right, got it. So that's the improvisation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was always very open to people suggesting things like that, or angles. Yeah.
And was there any moment when you're filming, whatever it's doing to do with the film process, you're like, this is so difficult, I wasn't expecting this. You might have got it and it's in the can, but it was anything really tricky to do that you weren't expecting necessarily?
I think not filming wise, because I have so much experience as a documentary filmmaker myself. I work for a college where my job is basically to go shoot their promo videos and commercials and educational videos and stuff like that, interviews all the time. And this is there's a lot of interviews in the movie itself that are used to advance the story, right?
Yeah.
So that to me was not the hard part. The hard part to me as a first-time director, I think, is just getting the actors to act natural, despite all the craziness that's going around just outside of the rectangle of your frame. The people inside have to act as true as they possibly can to sell the film. And so for me as a first-time director, I feel like maybe I could have been more assertive, and I think that the next time I make a film I will be, because I can say, hey, I've done this before and I know it works. But I really did trust my actors this time. I let them kind of do their own thing, and I think for the most part it turned out pretty good, but I would like to have more control over the acting next time. More control over myself as a director. Directing actors, I think, is very difficult.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
I think there was a unique challenge too with this film because it's not traditional camera angles, and so
no, it's quite edgy and
right.
off the wall. It's off the wall, but it is off the wall. But and that again was deliberate. I get that. Yeah. So you're not just dealing with what we've called, in inverted commas, I hate that, with traditional camera angles. I can see.
But with the traditional camera angles, you're cutting here and there and here and there, and it's always moving. And so if an actor needed to do a line over, just cut to a different angle, no big deal. But a lot of times in frame switch, you have your security camera that's up in the corner, and that's all you've got.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing has to be done perfect in one take. Or let's say the dash camera in the car, they're sitting in the car.
Because it's a static camera, isn't it?
Right, exactly. And it's a 2.5 minute long scene, and they have to know all of those lines for the full 2.5 minutes. And they're so vulnerable and exposed, and there's no hiding any kind of error, and so the actors can't overplay at all. They can't exaggerate their face, they can't exaggerate their voice, because it will be very evident, and there's no way to cut around it. So I think that was an interesting challenge.
And when you're both in this project, did you sort of ever are you constantly taking the work home, or did you say, look, we're doing this when we're at work, we're working and that's it, but I suppose what I'm trying to get at here is there's got to be a downtime, isn't there, from whatever you're working on, in this case frame switch. So were you working when you were not on set as well? Were you like, hang on, look, let's just leave this behind for a day, and then when we're back on set we carry on? Was it, maybe you can't do that because I'm no filmmaker, I don't know how it worked, but is it constant?
I personally found it very hard to put the film down, because
it's your life, it consumes you.
Yeah, you only have one first chance, and I didn't want to screw it up, and I've been involved in so many pictures that you work on it, and maybe you film the entire thing, or you film 3/4 of it, and then suddenly everything just hits a brick wall. You never hear from the director again, you never see the footage, you don't see a final product. And I've worked on so many things, and I think that's a very common thing for people who work in films, especially actors, that they devote themselves to something, and then they never really get to see it or even get a scene from it to use on their reel, And I was determined that whatever happened, that wasn't going to happen to us, even if it took 3.5 years. And so, Christina will tell you, it was difficult for me to turn it off. And I think that I was on for 3 years. And I'm just now getting to the point where I'm like, oh God, like I just had a kid. I don't want to have another kid anytime soon.
We joke that it's our 4-year-old child.
Believe me, they're a handful. I've got a 3.5-year-old.
Yeah, like coming here and talking to you and doing this. This is my vacation basically, and I'm in no hurry to jump into the next one. Although I've already been asked to jump into the next one.
Something else.
Yeah.
He has a couple of projects lined up.
Yeah.
So can I ask? I mean, this is a question I've often asked filmmakers, especially new. This is more directed at you, actually. That filmmakers often say to me that it's like a drug addiction once they start filmmaking, because once you've been through it, and I know you've got another whole career plan. Now you've done this. Can you see what? I mean, can you let go of this, or is it kind of actually shit? This was so interesting. I loved it so much. What am I going to do?
Yes, I don't want to step on anyone's toes. He's the director. This is his life, and I just happened to jump into filmmaking because I was able to be a part of what he was doing. You know?
Yeah.
But now that I have been a part of it, I see myself. It's like we were just talking about this the other night. It's like maybe someday I could be a screenwriter because I love writing. My degree is in writing, and I've always wanted to be a fiction author someday. And so maybe I could pursue that through screenwriting. And I would love to direct. There are not enough female directors out there.
Absolutely not. No.
You know, especially minority female directors who can offer that kind of perspective. And so those are two things that now I actually do have on my mind that I didn't before.
It's the same with John, and I'm not saying he's an old hand. That's not what I'm trying to. No, I don't mean that. But
poor John.
No, I don't mean that. It's, I know he's had a long career, and I know obviously I've got an idea of your background, but I can only guess, again, particularly you, because it's your first project that you've been involved in, what it must be like when, because you've seen your projects come to fruition. I know you've done documentary, but you haven't because it's your first thing. So I can imagine you're sitting there, and I know you've seen rough cuts and edits, and because you've been involved. But when you actually see your film, not necessarily on screen for the first time, because you might have been alone sitting in the editing room, I don't know. But when you see it first time with an audience, I mean, it must be very difficult to explain the feeling.
Yes.
Because suddenly something you're involved in, which is creative, which is great, the whole program is actually there. I mean, it must be very surreal.
It is, and at the same time, I'm trying to imagine what's going on in all of their heads, and that's kind of what I was trying to do the whole time. Is even as we were filming, you know, shooting all the scenes and stuff, I'm wondering to myself, what does this look like to someone who has no idea what this story is about?
I guess that's a trust thing, because you've got to trust that what you're going to actually do in the end is going to be coherent, which obviously is. Yeah. But being part of that from the beginning, having not done it before, even though I know we all know Drew's got filmmaking background, and it's going on for a long time, because it's not like, I don't know, boiling an egg or making a cake or anything involved in most people's lives, because most people won't have any kind of experience, and it's just moving on a very long, slow space. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, was there any point you thought, oh God, this is really tough, really, really tough? What have I let myself in for?
Yes, you know, I'm with this guy.
Yeah.
And so as tough as it could be for me at times, I knew it was far tougher for him than I could imagine, you know. And like he said, he was on for 3 years. He was in that headspace of making this film, and he was living in this film's world for 3 years. And so I think that was extremely challenging to deal with that, and then have to return to everyday life and go to your day job and deal with the trials and tribulations of your family and friends and whatever life throws at you. And so trying to juggle those two things was an immense challenge at times, but it was completely rewarding.
And I'm glad you think so.
No. What is there something that either of you will cut that? Looking back, wish you had put into the film.
Yeah, I do. I wish that I had. I wish I'd spent more time working on my own, just exploring my own wants for the film. I guess, like the things that I wished for the film at the beginning. I wish that I had spent more time developing that and sticking with that. But that's just the dictator in me, I think. You know, I think that once you before you even release the film to the world, you're releasing it to the people that you're working with, the actors and the crew, right? And you have to compromise with them and make them feel like they're a part of it, because it was a long process. And if you screw with them, if you make them feel like your opinion doesn't matter to me or anything like that, then you're not a good leader. You're not inspiring a lot of confidence. So I wanted to take the best ideas from everybody, even if that meant changing my original vision along the way, right? And so I think that's what happened to me. Also, like I said, I don't think that I'm so strong an acting director as I am an editor. I come from an editing background.
Yeah.
So I wish that I could serve the film better by being less self-conscious, maybe. I think that I was self-conscious because this is my first film, and maybe that self-consciousness hid some of my own humanity, some of my own anger, some of my own flaws that I could have put in there and pumped it full of some of that humanity that I think the
That was